The smoke came first, creeping through the canopy like a living shadow before the flames ever showed themselves. Elira had been gathering roots near the riverbed when the acrid scent hit her nostrils, sharp and wrong. She straightened, her calloused hands still clutching the fibrous tubers, and turned her face toward the western ridge. The sky there had darkened to an unnatural grey, and beneath it an orange glow pulsed like a wound in the world. Fire. The destroyer. The cleanser. The thing her people had learned to fear above all else. She dropped the roots and ran. Her shelter sat nestled in a grove of ancient pines, their trunks thick as 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder. She had chosen this place 2 winters ago, precisely because the river curved around it, creating a natural barrier. But fire didn't always respect water, especially when the wind carried its hunger across the dry season's brittle undergrowth. Elira's feet knew every stone and root of the forest floor. She moved with the fluid certainty of someone who had walked these paths in darkness, in storms, in the desperate quiet of predator-haunted nights. Her dark hair, bound in a single thick braid, swung against her back as she leaped over a fallen log. The smoke thickened with each breath, turning the afternoon sun into a dull copper disk. She was nearly to the clearing when she heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist in a forest fleeing from flames. A groan. Human, male, coming from the direction of the fire itself. Every instinct screamed at her to keep running. The fire was close now. She could hear its roar, feel its heat pressing against the air like an invisible hand. But her feet slowed, then stopped. She turned toward the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs. Foolish, she whispered to herself. Even as she changed direction, the smoke was dense here, stinging her eyes until tears streamed down her cheeks. She pulled the leather wrap from around her shoulders and pressed it against her nose and mouth, breathing through the material. The heat intensified with each step, and through the haze, she saw the flames dancing between the trees, consuming everything in their path with methodical hunger. And there, collapsed at the base of a smoldering oak, was a man. He lay face down, one arm twisted beneath him, the other stretched forward as though he had been crawling. Blood darkened his leather vest, and a vicious gash ran along his left thigh. But what struck Elira most was his size. He was massive, shoulders broad as a bear's, arms thick with muscle. Even unconscious and broken, he looked dangerous. The fire crackled closer. A pine exploded somewhere to her left, showering sparks into the air. There was no time for hesitation, no space for fear. Elira grabbed the man under his arms and pulled. He was impossibly heavy. Her feet slipped in the ash and pine needles as she dragged him backward, away from the advancing flames. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she gritted her teeth and pulled harder. One step, another. The heat was unbearable now, singeing the small hairs on her arms, making the air itself shimmer and warp. She pulled him for what felt like hours, but could only have been minutes. Her world narrowing to the rhythm of her straining body and the relentless approach of the fire. When she finally reached the relative safety of the riverbank, she collapsed beside him, her lungs burning, her vision spotted with darkness. But she had done it. She had saved him. The question of why and what manner of man she had just risked her life for would have to wait until she could breathe again. Elira's shelter had survived, protected by the river's curve and the shifting wind that had mercifully turned the fire's main path away from her grove. But the world beyond her small sanctuary had transformed into a landscape of ash and blackened skeletons. The air tasted of destruction, and even the river seemed subdued, its usual music replaced by a mournful whisper. She had dragged the stranger to her shelter, a task that had taken the last of her strength. Now, as twilight painted the smoke-stained sky in shades of bruised purple, she knelt beside him and assessed the damage. The gash on his thigh was deep but clean, a blade wound, not the work of claws or teeth. Someone had tried to kill this man, and recently. She cleaned it with water from the river, then packed it with a poultice of yarrow and plantain, binding it tightly with strips of leather. His other injuries were numerous: bruised ribs, cuts along his arms and chest, and a nasty swelling at the back of his skull that explained his unconsciousness. As she worked, she studied him more carefully. His face was striking, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, a nose that had been broken at least once. But it was the markings that made her breath catch. Across his shoulders and upper arms, elaborate patterns had been carved into his skin and filled with dark pigment, the permanent marks of a warrior, telling stories of battles and victories in a language she barely understood. And around his neck, hanging on a thick cord of braided sinew, was a tooth. Not just any tooth, a massive canine, easily as long as her palm, polished to a dark gleam. She knew what it was. Everyone did. Only the chiefs of the great tribes wore the fangs of the ancient dire wolves. The beasts that had terrorized the valleys before men had hunted them to near extinction. Her hand trembled as she reached out, almost touching the tooth before pulling back. "What have I done?" she whispered. The Iron Fang tribe. It had to be. They were the most feared warriors in the known valleys, raiders who struck without warning and showed no mercy. They took what they wanted, food, tools, weapons, women, and left destruction in their wake. And she had just saved their chief. Elira sat back on her heels, her mind racing. She could kill him now while he was helpless. One quick strike with her stone blade, and the valleys would be rid of their greatest terror. But even as the thought formed, she knew she wouldn't do it. Whatever this man was, whatever he had done, she had pulled him from the fire. She had chosen to save him, and that choice bound her to him in ways she didn't fully understand, but couldn't ignore. "Let's hope you're worth the trouble," she muttered, pulling a hide blanket over his still form. That night, she barely slept, keeping one hand on her blade and her eyes on the unconscious chief. The forest around her was eerily quiet, the usual night sounds silenced by the fire's passage. Only the river sang on, indifferent to the dramas of men and the choices of foolish women who saved them. Kalen returned to consciousness slowly, fighting through layers of pain and confusion. His first sensation was warmth, not the searing heat of flames, but the gentle warmth of a carefully tended fire. His second was the scent of herbs, earthy and medicinal, mixed with something else, smoke, but older now, settled into everything. He tried to open his eyes, but even that simple action sent spikes of pain through his skull. He groaned and immediately heard movement nearby, quick, cautious footsteps. "Don't move too quickly." A woman's voice, low and firm. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. Your body needs time, 2 days." Galen's warrior instincts flared, and he forced his eyes open despite the pain. The world swam into blurry focus, a low shelter of branches and hide, a small fire crackling in a carefully constructed pit, and a woman sitting just beyond arm's reach, watching him with eyes like dark honey. She was young, perhaps 20 summers, with long black hair and skin bronzed by sun and weather. Her face was striking, high cheekbones, a determined chin, lips pressed together in an expression that was neither welcoming nor hostile. She wore simple clothing of leather and hide, and in her hand, resting casually across her knees, was a stone blade. "Who are you?" Galen's voice came out as a rasp, his throat raw from smoke. "The woman who pulled you from a fire and patched your wounds," she replied evenly. "I'm called Elira, and you are?" Kalen hesitated. The last thing he remembered was the ambush, Valen's treachery, the blade that had found his thigh, the desperate flight into the forest as flames rose around him. His warriors would be searching for him, but if word had spread that he had fallen, the other chiefs would already be circling, ready to tear apart everything he had built. "Kyle," he said finally, giving her the shortened form that ordinary warriors used among themselves. "I'm a hunter from the northern clans." Something flickered in her eyes, doubt perhaps or recognition, but she didn't challenge the lie. Instead, she reached for a clay vessel beside her and held it out. "Drink this. It will help with the pain." Kalen tried to push himself up and immediately regretted it. Pain exploded through his thigh and ribs, stealing his breath. Elira moved then, quick and efficient, helping him sit propped against a bundle of hide. Her hands were strong and sure, but she kept the blade within easy reach. Smart woman. He drank the bitter tea she offered, feeling its warmth spread through his chest. As his head cleared, he took better stock of his situation. His weapons were gone, not surprising. His vest had been removed, leaving him bare-chested, except for the bandages wrapped around his ribs. And his injuries, while painful, had been expertly treated. This woman knew healing arts, and she had used them well. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You saved my life," Elira nodded, her expression unreadable. The fire was massive. "What were you doing so deep in the burning forest?" "Running," Kalen said, which was true enough. Kalen met her gaze, impressed, despite himself, by her sharp observation. Yes, a dispute over hunting grounds. It got out of hand, another flicker in those honey-colored eyes. She didn't believe him, or at least didn't believe it was the whole truth. But again she let it pass. "You're fortunate I found you when I did," she said. "Another few minutes, and you would have been ash. The fire consumed everything for leagues to the west. Where are we?" "My home, or what's left of it. The fire spared my grove, but the forest around us is destroyed." She stood, moving to tend the fire. "You can stay until you're strong enough to travel. After that, you'll need to leave. I live alone here, and I prefer it that way." Kalen watched her move, noting the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in her environment. "Why do you live alone? Where is your tribe?" Her shoulders stiffened slightly. "Dead. Taken by fever 3 winters past. I survived. I chose to remain here rather than seek another clan. That's dangerous." A woman alone, with no one to protect her. Elira turned, and the look in her eyes stopped his words. "I protect myself. I've survived alone for 3 winters. I don't need a man to keep me safe." Kalen raised his hands in surrender, though the gesture made his ribs protest. "I meant no insult. Clearly, you're more than capable." She studied him for a long moment, then seemed to relax fractionally. "Rest. You'll need days before you can walk properly, and weeks before you can travel any real distance. I'll bring you food shortly." As she ducked out of the shelter, Kalen leaned back against the hides and closed his eyes. The situation was more complicated than he had anticipated. This woman, this Elira, had saved him without knowing who he was. But she was intelligent and observant. How long before she pieced together the truth? And when his warriors finally found him, what would they do when they discovered their chief had been tended by a lone woman in the forest? More pressingly, what would Valen do? His second-in-command had betrayed him, that much was certain now. The ambush had been too well planned, too perfectly executed. Valen had allies within the tribe, men who believed Kalen's leadership had grown too cautious, too focused on building rather than raiding. And if they believed him dead, Valen would already be claiming the chief's tooth for himself. Kalen's hand went to his neck, relieved to find the dire wolf fang still there. At least Elira hadn't taken that, or perhaps she had seen it and chosen to leave it. Either way, it was a problem that would need addressing, but not today. Today, he would rest and heal under the care of this mysterious woman, and he would watch her, learning everything he could about Elira of the forest, the woman who had defied death to save a stranger. Perhaps, when the time came, that knowledge would be enough to keep them both alive. Over the following days, a strange routine developed. Elira would leave each morning to forage and check her snares, returning with food that she prepared in silence. Kalen's body healed with the stubborn resilience of a man accustomed to wounds, and soon he could sit up without gasping, could even stand for short periods with her help. They spoke little at first, their interactions limited to the necessities of his care. But gradually, in the quiet hours when pain kept him from sleeping and she sat by the fire working leather or weaving baskets, words began to flow more freely. "You're skilled with healing," Kalen observed one evening, watching her grind dried herbs between smooth stones. "Where did you learn?" "My mother was the clan's healer," Elira replied without looking up. "She taught me everything before the fever took her. That knowledge was the only inheritance that couldn't be stolen or lost. Wise woman." "Yes, she was." Elira's hands paused in their work. "What about your mother? Is she still with your clan?" Kalen felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always came with thoughts of his mother. She died bringing me into this world. I never knew her. I'm sorry, don't be. It was long ago. He shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position. My father raised me, taught me to hunt, to fight, to lead. To lead? Elira's gaze sharpened. I thought you said you were just a hunter. Kalen cursed himself internally for the slip. Lead hunting parties, nothing more. She held his gaze for a moment longer than comfortable, then returned to her grinding. Of course, the silence that followed felt weighted with unspoken questions. Kalen changed the subject. Why haven't you sought another tribe? Surely some clan would welcome a woman with your skills. Elira's jaw tightened. I visited 3 clans in the first year after my people died. Each time, the chief made the same offer. I could join if I took a husband from among his warriors. As if my skills and knowledge meant nothing without a man to legitimize my presence. She dumped the ground herbs into a small vessel with more force than necessary. I chose freedom instead, and you're not lonely. Sometimes, she admitted, surprising him with her honesty, but lonely is better than owned. Out here, my choices are my own. My life is my own. Kalen nodded slowly, understanding more than she knew. Freedom is worth fighting for, worth dying for even. Something in his tone made her look up, really look at him, and for a moment he thought she might press the question of who he really was. But instead she simply said, "Yes, it is." That night, Kalen lay awake long after Elira had rolled into her sleeping furs on the opposite side of the fire. He thought about her words, about the choice she had made to remain alone rather than sacrifice her independence. It was a choice most women in the tribes never had the opportunity to make, and one that most men would never understand or respect. But Kalen understood, and despite the complications it would create, despite the danger it represented to them both, he found himself admiring this fierce, solitary woman who had saved his life. By the 8th day, Kalen could walk short distances without assistance, though his legs still protested with every step. Elira had fashioned him a crude crutch from a forked branch, and he used it to venture outside the shelter, needing to feel sunlight on his face and assess the damage the fire had wrought. The devastation was extensive. Where once a lush forest had thrived, now only blackened trunks remained, reaching toward the sky like the fingers of buried giants. The understory was gone completely, reduced to ash that shifted like grey snow beneath his feet. Only Elira's grove, protected by the river's embrace, retained any semblance of life. "It will regrow," Elira said, coming to stand beside him. "Fire destroys, but it also clears the way for new growth. In a few seasons, you won't recognize this place. You speak from experience. I've seen 3 major fires in my lifetime. The forest always comes back, though never quite the same as before." She shaded her eyes, looking toward the distant ridges. "What worries me more is that the animals will be scarce for months. Everything either died or fled. We'll need to range farther to hunt." Kalen noted her use of "we," but said nothing. Instead, he asked, "Do you ever see other people? Traders, hunters?" "Occasionally. There's a trail about 2 days north that traders use between the valley tribes. Sometimes hunters pass through, though usually they respect my territory once I make it clear I'm here." She glanced at him sidelong. "Are you wondering if anyone's looking for you?" He couldn't deny it. "My companions. If they survived the ambush and the fire, they'll be searching. Are they good men, your companions?" The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. Were his warriors good men? They were loyal, fierce, and skilled in battle. They followed him because they believed in his strength, his leadership, but good. That was a more complicated measure. "They're my brothers in all but blood," Kalen said finally. "They would die for me, and I for them." Elira nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "Then I hope they find you safe." No one should have to mourn a brother. They stood in companionable silence, watching the wind stir ashes into small whirlwinds. Then Elira tensed, her head cocking like a deer sensing a predator. "What is it?" Kalen asked, his warrior instincts immediately alert. "Smoke? Fresh smoke? Not from the old fire?" She pointed toward the northeast. Someone's made camp not far from here. Kaelin's heart quickened. How far? Perhaps an hour's walk? Maybe less. She turned to him, her face grave. Could be your companions. Could be someone else. Either way, we should be cautious. I need to see who it is. You can barely walk 100 paces without exhaustion. You're in no condition for... If it's my men, I need to let them know I'm alive. And if it's not... He left the alternative unspoken, but they both understood. If enemies had come this far into the territory, it meant they were hunting for him specifically. Elira studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're going with or without me, aren't you? Yes, stubborn fool, but there was no real anger in her voice. Wait here. I'll scout ahead and see who they are. If it's safe, I'll signal you. If not, I'll return, and we'll decide what to do. Elira, this is my forest, Kyle. What's left of it anyway. I know every stone and shadow. You'd be spotted long before you saw anything useful. She was already moving toward the shelter. I'll be back before sunset. Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone. Kaelin watched her gather a few supplies, a blade, a water skin, a small pouch. The hours crawled by. Kaelin tried to rest, knowing his body needed it, but anxiety gnawed at him. Who had made that camp? If it was his warriors, he needed to reveal himself, to reassert his leadership before Varlin's lies took root. But if it was enemies, he was putting Elira in danger simply by being here. The sun had begun its descent toward the western peaks when Elira finally returned. Kaelin knew something was wrong the moment he saw her face. Your men, she said without preamble. At least I think they're yours. 8 warriors, heavily armed. They've made camp by the stream where it bends near the old rock fall. Relief flooded through him. That's them. That's one of my... He caught himself, but too late. Elira's eyes narrowed. One of your usual campsites? I thought you were just a hunter from the northern clans. There was no point in lying anymore. Kaelin met her gaze steadily. I am a hunter, but I'm also more than that. How much more? Her hand had drifted toward her blade. Elira, how much more, Kael? Or is that even your real name? Kaelin drew a slow breath, knowing his next words would change everything. My name is Kaelin. I'm the chief of the Iron Fang tribe. The color drained from Elira's face. The Iron Fang. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. The raiders, the killers. Yes, I saved the man who leads the most feared warriors in the valleys. The man whose tribe has burned villages and taken captives. The man... She stopped, her hands clenching into fists. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have helped me if you'd known? No, she said immediately. I would have left you to burn. The honesty of it stung, but Kaelin nodded. That's why I didn't tell you. You lied to me. I omitted the truth. There's a difference. Not to me. Elira turned away, her shoulders rigid with tension. You need to leave tonight. Go to your warriors and get out of my forest. Elira, please. Now, Kaelin. Before I change my mind about letting you go at all. Kaelin wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand that the reputation of the Iron Fang tribe was more complicated than she knew. But looking at her stiff back, at the way her hands trembled with barely contained anger, he realized that words would accomplish nothing. I'll go, he said quietly. But Elira, you need to know something first. The men who ambushed me, they're from my own tribe. My second-in-command, Valen, believes I've grown weak. He wants to lead the Iron Fang back to the old ways. More raiding, more violence. If he's convinced the warriors I'm dead, those men at the stream might not welcome my return. They might have orders to finish what the ambush started. Elira turned back to him, her expression torn between anger and concern. That's not my problem. No, it's not. But if Valen succeeds in taking control, the raids will increase. More villages burned, more people taken or killed, including eventually solitary healers living alone in the forest. Her jaw clenched. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to make you understand what's at stake. Not just for me, but for everyone in these valleys. He took a careful step toward her. Help me reach my warriors. Help me find out if they're loyal or if Valen has turned them. After that, I'll leave and you'll never see me again. You swear it? On the tooth you wear? Kaelin touched the dire wolf fang at his throat. On my chief's tooth, on my father's memory, on the lives of every warrior who has ever followed me, I swear it." Elira was silent for a long time, conflict clear in every line of her body. Finally, she let out a long breath. "One chance, Kaelin. That's all you get. We'll approach your camp together. I'll help you determine if your men are loyal. But after that, we're done. You go your way, and I go mine. Agreed. And if you've lied to me about anything else, if this is some trap or trick, I will find a way to make you regret it." Looking into her fierce eyes, Kaelin didn't doubt it for a moment. Understood. They prepared to leave in tense silence, Elira gathering supplies, while Kaelin tested his leg, pushing through the pain. The sun was setting now, painting the devastated forest in shades of orange and red that reminded him too much of the fire that had nearly claimed his life. As they set out toward the distant camp, Kaelin found himself hoping that his warriors were still loyal, that Valen's betrayal hadn't spread like poison through the entire tribe. Because if it had, he and Elira were walking into a trap from which neither might escape, and despite her anger, despite the justified fury in her eyes, Kaelin realized he would do whatever necessary to keep this fierce, independent woman safe from the chaos he had brought into her solitary life, even if it meant facing his own death to do so. They moved through the ash-covered forest like ghosts, Elira leading with sure steps while Kaelin followed, relying on his makeshift crutch and stubborn will. The pain in his leg had intensified with the exertion, but he pushed it aside. Pain was familiar. Pain could be endured. As they neared the camp, Elira raised her hand, signaling for silence. They crept forward until the orange glow of a fire became visible through the skeletal trees. Voices drifted toward them, male, relaxed, speaking in the guttural dialect of the Iron Fang tribe. Elira positioned them behind a fallen log, close enough to observe, but concealed by shadow and the growing darkness. 8 warriors sat around the fire, their weapons within easy reach, but their postures suggesting they felt safe. Kaelin recognized each face, Torvin, his best tracker. Mako, the young warrior who had saved Kaelin's life in the raid on the western villages. Reth, whose loyalty had never wavered in 10 years of following Kaelin's leadership, but it was the 9th man who made Kaelin's blood run cold. Valen stood on the far side of the fire, his tall frame casting a long shadow, and around his neck, clearly visible in the firelight, hung a second dire wolf fang, a fake carved from bone and stained dark. But convincing enough in poor light. "Tomorrow we expand the search," Valen was saying, his voice carrying authority Kaelin had never authorized him to assume. "Kaelin is dead, burned in the fire or bled out from his wounds. It's time we accepted that and moved forward." "The chief wouldn't fall so easily," Torvin said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We should search longer." "We've searched for over a week," Valen countered. "No man could survive those wounds and that fire. I saw him fall. I tried to reach him, but the flames—" He let the sentence hang, painting himself as the tragic hero who had tried and failed to save his chief. Liar, Kaelin thought, his hands clenching. "What about the succession?" Mako asked. "Who leads the Iron Fang now?" Valen touched the false fang at his throat. "The chief's tooth passed to me. I was his second. It's only right that I assume leadership." "That's not how it works," Reth said sharply. "The tooth is claimed, not passed. You'd have to face challenges from every warrior who thinks he can lead better. Then let them challenge." Valen's smile was cold. "I welcome it. But know this, under my leadership, the Iron Fang will return to its true purpose. No more building, no more trading with weak tribes. We take what we need, and we crush anyone who stands against us." Several warriors shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke in open opposition. Kaelin felt Elira's gaze on him and turned to meet it. In the darkness, her eyes reflected the distant firelight. "Those are your loyal men," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Some of them," Kaelin replied quietly. "Reth and Torvin, certainly. Mako as well, though he's young. The others, I'm not sure." Valen's had time to poison them with his vision. "What are you going to do?" "Good question." Kaelin assessed the situation with a warrior's eye. He was injured, armed only with Elira's stone blade, facing 8 fully equipped warriors and a man who had already tried to kill him once. Direct confrontation would be suicide, unless he changed the terms of engagement. "I need to separate them," Kalen said, forming a plan even as he spoke. "Draw Valen away from the others. Expose his lies before he can spin more of them." "How?" "Do you trust me?" Elira's laugh was bitter and quiet. "Not remotely." "Fair enough. But will you help me anyway?" She was silent for a long moment, her gaze returning to the camp. Then, surprising him, she nodded. "Tell me what you need." Kalen outlined his plan quickly, watching her expression shift from doubt to incredulity to resigned acceptance. When he finished, she shook her head. "This is insane. It'll likely get us both killed. Do you have a better idea?" "Yes. We leave right now and let these men kill each other without us." Elira, "But I won't," she interrupted. "Because you're right. If Valen leads the Iron Fang, he'll bring nothing but destruction. And eventually that destruction will reach even me." She met his eyes. "So let's do this, before I come to my senses." They moved into position, Elira circling wide, while Kalen waited for the right moment. His leg throbbed with every heartbeat, and he wondered if he had the strength for what was coming. But there was no choice, not anymore. When Elira's signal came, the sharp cry of a night bird that didn't belong in a burned forest, "Did you?" Kalen limped forward, using his crutch but standing as tall as his injuries allowed. "Strange. I remember you putting that blade in my leg yourself, right before you left me to die in the ambush you arranged." Gasps from the gathered warriors. Valen's hand moved toward his weapon, but Reth was suddenly there, his own blade raised in warning. "Is this true?" Reth demanded. "Did you betray our chief?" "He lies," Valen said smoothly. "The wounds, the fire, they've addled his mind. I tried to save him." "Ask Torvin." He was there. All eyes turned to Torvin, the tracker who had been at the ambush. The man's face was agonized, torn between loyalty and fear. I saw the chief fall. But Valen, he told us to retreat. He said Kalen was already dead, because he was supposed to be," Kalen said quietly. "That was the plan, wasn't it, Valen? An ambush disguised as a raid. Only leave me for the fire. No witnesses, no questions. Prove it," Valen challenged. "Show me proof, or admit your mind has broken." That was when Elira stepped into the light, her bow drawn and an arrow aimed directly at Valen's heart. "I'm his proof," she said calmly. "I pulled him from the fire. I treated his wounds, and I heard him speak your name in his fever dreams, cursing the betrayer who had tried to kill him." The warriors stared at this unexpected woman, taking in her confident stance and the deadly steadiness of her aim. Mako whispered, the forest healer. "I've heard stories." "Stories?" Elira's lips quirked. "How flattering. But right now, you should focus on the fact that your chief speaks the truth. This man," she gestured with her bow at Valen, "is a traitor and a liar." Valen's mask finally slipped, fury twisting his features. "A woman's word means nothing. And even if Kalen survived, look at him. He's broken, weak. The Iron Fang needs a strong leader, not a cripple who prefers building to raiding. The Iron Fang needs a leader who thinks beyond the next battle," Kalen countered, "who understands that strength without wisdom is just violence, that taking everything leaves nothing for tomorrow. Philosophy won't feed our families or protect our territory," Valen shot back. "The other tribes see your caution as weakness. They're already planning to move against us. Let them try." Kalen stepped closer, ignoring the pain that radiated from his leg. "But they'll find the Iron Fang isn't weak. We're strategic, we're smart, and we don't waste warrior lives on meaningless raids." "Meaningless?" Valen's laugh was harsh. "Everything you've built will crumble the moment a stronger tribe decides to take it. That's the way of the world, Kalen. The strong survive, the weak perish." "Then prove your strength," Kalen said quietly. "Challenge me. Here now. If I'm as weak as you claim, defeating me should be easy. And if you win, the warriors will follow you willingly, not because you lied and stole a dead man's authority." The camp fell silent. Every warrior knew what this meant. A chief's challenge, the oldest law of the tribes. Combat to settle leadership, with the victor claiming absolute authority. But they also knew Kaelin's condition. He could barely stand without his crutch. His leg was bound with bandages still seeping blood, and exhaustion lined every feature of his face. Valen's eyes gleamed with triumph. "You're in no condition to fight, old friend. I don't want to kill you." "Liar," Elira said softly, her arrow still trained on Valen. "You've wanted him dead since the moment you put that blade in his leg. Now he's giving you what you want, a chance to finish it with witnesses legitimately. Unless you're afraid?" The challenge in her voice was deliberate, calculated to sting Valen's pride. It worked. His jaw clenched and he nodded sharply. "Very well. A chief's challenge. To first blood or yielding?" He drew his blade, a wicked length of napped obsidian that gleamed in the firelight. "Though I doubt you'll last long enough for either." Kaelin handed his crutch to Elira, their eyes meeting briefly. In that moment, unspoken understanding passed between them. Gratitude, regret, and something else, something neither had time to name. "Don't die stupidly," Elira whispered. "I didn't drag you out of a fire just to watch you bleed out in a challenge circle." "I'll do my best," Kaelin replied, managing a small smile. The warriors formed a loose circle, and Kaelin limped to its center. Reth offered him a blade, a good weapon of flint and antler, and Kaelin accepted it with a nod of thanks. Every movement sent fresh pain through his body, but he forced it down, reaching for the cold clarity that had kept him alive through 100 battles. Valen circled him like a wolf, stalking wounded prey, his confidence evident in every movement. "I'll make it quick, Kaelin. For the friendship we once had, we were never friends," Kaelin replied. "I was your chief. You were my warrior. You forgot which one mattered more." Valen struck without warning, a fast slash aimed at Kaelin's injured leg. Kaelin barely managed to pivot away, his wounded thigh screaming in protest. He couldn't move like he normally would, couldn't rely on speed or agility. He would have to fight smart, conserve energy, and wait for an opening. The second strike came high, and Kaelin blocked it, the impact sending shockwaves up his arm. Valen pressed the attack, driving Kaelin backward with a series of swift strikes. The watching warriors murmured as Kaelin gave ground, his movements defensive, almost desperate. But Kaelin was counting Valen's strikes, learning the rhythm of his attacks, cataloguing the small tells that preceded each movement. Valen had always been aggressive, favoring power over finesse. And in his confidence, he was being predictable. When Valen committed to a heavy downward strike, Kaelin was ready. He sidestepped, crying out as his leg nearly buckled beneath him, but used the momentum to slash across Valen's exposed ribs. The blade bit deep, and blood bloomed across Valen's side. First blood. The challenge was over, but Valen didn't stop. His face twisted with rage, and he lunged forward, abandoning technique for brutal force. "You should have stayed dead." Kaelin blocked desperately, but his injured leg finally gave out. He fell to one knee, and Valen's blade slashed downward toward his exposed neck. An arrow sprouted from Valen's shoulder before the strike landed. Valen howled, spinning to face Elira, who had another arrow already knocked. "You interfere in a chief's challenge?" "You lost," Elira said coldly. First blood was drawn. The challenge ended. What you were attempting wasn't a challenge. It was murder. Reth and several other warriors moved forward, their weapons now pointed at Valen. "She speaks truth," Reth said grimly. "You dishonor yourself and the tribe. The challenge is finished. Kaelin remains chief." Valen looked around the circle, seeing his support crumbling, understanding that his gambit had failed. For a moment, Kaelin thought he might attack anyway, might force the warriors to kill him. But then Valen's shoulders sagged and he lowered his blade. "This isn't over," Valen said quietly. "The other tribes are coming, Kaelin, and your weakness will be the death of us all." "Then leave," Kaelin said, pushing himself back to his feet with Mako's assistance. "Take those who believe as you do and start your own tribe. Raid and conquer to your heart's content. But you will not lead the Iron Fang down that path." Valen stared at him for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. Mercy, even now you show mercy. It will destroy you one day." He yanked the arrow from his shoulder with a grunt, then turned to the assembled warriors. "Any who wish to follow me, come now. We leave for the western valleys, where real warriors still remember how to fight." 3 warriors stepped forward, men Kaelan recognized as the youngest, the most hungry for glory and battle. He felt a pang of loss, but nodded his acceptance. "Go in peace. But know this, if you raise weapons against the Iron Fang, you will be treated as enemies." Valen gathered his new followers, and within minutes they had disappeared into the darkness, leaving the camp in tense silence. Reth was the first to move, kneeling before Kaelan. "Forgive us, Chief. We should have seen his treachery. There's nothing to forgive." Valen was clever and patient. Kaelan looked around the circle of his warriors, seeing relief and renewed loyalty in their faces. "But now we must be vigilant." He spoke truth about one thing. The other tribes will see this division as weakness. "We must be ready. We'll be ready," Torvin said firmly. "The Iron Fang stands with you, Chief." The others echoed the sentiment, and Kaelan felt the weight of leadership settle back onto his shoulders. It was a familiar burden, but tonight it felt heavier than before. Elira approached quietly, offering him his crutch. "You fought well, stupidly but well. High praise from the woman who saved my life," Kaelan replied with a slight smile. Then more seriously, "Thank you for everything," she shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "I kept my word. Now I'll keep the rest of it. You're healed enough to travel with your men. This is where we part ways." Elira, "No." Her voice was firm. "We made a deal. You go back to being a chief. I go back to being alone. That's how it has to be." Kaelan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that things had changed, that he couldn't simply walk away from the fierce woman who had defied death and tradition to help him. But he saw the determination in her eyes and knew that pushing would only drive her further away. "At least let us escort you back to your grove," he said. "The forest isn't safe with Valen and his men wandering it." Elira considered this, then nodded. "That I'll accept, but only to the river's edge. After that I travel alone." As the camp began to pack up, Reth approached Kaelan privately. "Chief, who is this woman? Why does she choose to live alone?" "She's a healer who lost her tribe to fever," Kaelan replied. "And she chooses solitude because no clan would accept her skills without demanding she surrender her freedom first." Reth frowned. "That's wasteful. A healer of her ability could save many lives." "Yes," Kaelan agreed quietly, "but not at the price of her independence." They traveled through the night, the warriors forming a protective circle around Kaelan and Elira. As they walked, Kaelan found himself studying her profile in the moonlight, memorizing the strong lines of her face, the proud set of her shoulders. He had known many women in his life, warriors, mothers, wives of his men, but none had affected him like this solitary healer who had pulled him from fire and demanded nothing in return. When they reached the river's edge at dawn, Elira stopped and turned to face them. "This is where I leave you." The warriors said their farewells with respect, each thanking her for saving their chief. When they had retreated to give Kaelan and Elira privacy, he stepped closer to her. "I owe you my life," he said simply. "That's a debt I can never fully repay." "You owe me nothing. I made a choice. You survived. That's enough." But her voice lacked its usual certainty. "Is it?" Kaelan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "Elira, I know you value your freedom above all else. I understand that, and I respect it. But I need you to know, if you ever change your mind, if you ever want something more than solitude, the Iron Fang would welcome you. Not as someone's wife, not as property, but as yourself. A healer, a warrior, a woman who makes her own choices." Elira's eyes widened slightly. "You would offer that to your tribe?"
"I would."
"And more?" Kaelan hesitated, then spoke the truth that had been growing in his heart. "I would offer you a place beside me. Not beneath me, but beside me. As an equal. As—" "Don't," Elira interrupted, her voice rough. "Don't say words you might regret when you return to your people, and remember who you are. I know exactly who I am. I'm a man who was given a second chance at life by someone extraordinary. And I'm not foolish enough to let that gift slip away without at least trying. Tears gathered in Elira's eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. "You barely know me. I know you're brave enough to run into fire for a stranger, smart enough to survive 3 winters alone, skilled enough to heal wounds that should have killed me, and stubborn enough to choose freedom over comfort every single time." He squeezed her hand gently. "That's enough. More than enough." For a long moment Elira was silent, conflict clear on her face. Then she pulled her hand away, stepping back. "I need time," she said quietly. "Time to think. Time to decide if I can truly trust a chief of the Iron Fang, or if I'm just fooling myself because you have kind eyes and pretty words." Kaelin nodded, accepting this. "Take all the time you need. I'll be at the Iron Fang settlement, 3 days' travel north along the Ridge Trail. If you come, you'll be welcomed. If you don't, I'll understand. And if the other tribes attack, if Valen returns with warriors, then I'll do what I've always done, protect my people and fight for what I believe in." Kaelin smiled slightly. "Though having a skilled healer would certainly improve our chances. Despite everything," Elira laughed. "You're manipulative. I'm practical. There's a difference." She shook her head, but she was smiling. "Go, Kaelin. Lead your tribe. Face your challenges. And maybe when the dust settles and the threats are dealt with, I'll come see this settlement of yours. See if a place that welcomes a woman's freedom actually exists, or if you're just a dreamer with a smooth tongue." "I hope you do," Kaelin said sincerely. "But either way, know this. You saved more than just my life. You reminded me why I fight for something better than endless raiding and violence. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, and the strongest people are often the ones who stand alone by choice, not necessity." Elira's expression softened. "You're a strange chief, Kaelin of the Iron Fang. Most leaders would have tried to claim me, to own me. Most leaders are fools." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, when you do come to visit, bring your blade. The world's changing, and we'll need warriors of all kinds for what's ahead. Assuming I come." "When you come," Kaelin corrected gently. "I have faith in your curiosity, if nothing else." He walked away before she could respond, rejoining his warriors who waited patiently. As they departed, Kaelin looked back once and found Elira still standing by the river, watching them go. Their eyes met across the distance, and though no words were spoken, Kaelin felt something pass between them, a possibility, a promise, a beginning. 3 weeks later, as Kaelin was meeting with the tribe elders to discuss fortifications against potential attacks, a warrior burst into the council shelter. "Chief, there's a woman at the gates. She says she's here to see you. She's armed and refuses to state her business to anyone else." Kaelin's heart leaped, but he kept his expression neutral. "Does this woman have a name?" "She says you'll know who she is." The elders grumbled about the interruption, but Kaelin was already standing. "Excuse me, this may be important." He walked to the settlement gates, his leg now healed enough that he barely limped. And there, standing with her pack and her blade, looking simultaneously defiant and nervous, was Elira. "You came," Kaelin said, unable to keep the joy from his voice. "I came to visit," Elira corrected quickly. "To see this place. To decide if what you offered was real or just fever dreams and pretty promises." "It's real. All of it." Kaelin stepped closer. "Stay as long as you like. Leave whenever you want. Your freedom is yours always." Elira studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I'll stay. For a while. See how it feels to be part of something again." She smiled slightly. "And maybe teach your warriors some proper healing techniques. From what I've heard, you'll need them." "We will," Kaelin agreed. "The other tribes are mobilizing. Valen's spreading lies and building alliances. There will be conflict. Then it's good I came when I did." Elira shifted her pack. "Because if you're going to survive what's coming, you'll need someone to patch you up when you do something stupid and heroic again. I'll try to keep the stupid heroics to a minimum." "See, that you do." She looked past him at the settlement, the sturdy shelters, the organized pathways, the women working alongside men in ways that spoke of respect rather than subjugation. "It's different than I expected. Better. Wait until you see the healing house. It's crude compared to what I'm sure you could create, but it's a start. Elira's eyes lit with interest. A dedicated healing space. That's actually quite progressive. I learned from the best, Kalen said softly. As they walked together into the settlement, warriors and families emerging to greet them with curiosity and welcome, Kalen felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for his own future, but for something larger. A way of living that honored strength without worshipping violence. A community where a woman could be valued for her skills and choices. A world where chiefs and healers could stand together, building something that would outlast any single battle or raid. Elira glanced at him as they walked. You're smiling. Should I be worried? Just thinking about the future. And what do you see there? Kalen looked at the fierce, independent woman who had saved his life and challenged everything he thought he knew about strength and leadership. Possibilities. More possibilities than I ever imagined. Elira snorted. That's vague and unhelpful. Then let me be specific. Kalen stopped, turning to face her fully. I see a healer who revolutionizes how we care for our wounded. I see a woman whose courage inspires others to question old ways and forge new paths. I see someone who chose to take a chance on a broken chief and a changing tribe. And if I'm very lucky, if I prove worthy of the trust you're placing in us, he paused. I see a queen who rules not through marriage or tradition, but through her own merit and the respect she commands. Elira's breath caught. That's a dangerous vision, Kalen. Queens who rule in their own right, that's not how the tribes work. Not yet, Kalen agreed. But maybe it's time they did. Maybe it's time we all stopped accepting how things are and started building how things should be. For a moment, Elira just stared at him. Then slowly she smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. You're either a visionary or a complete fool. I haven't decided which. Can't I be both? Probably. She started walking again, and Kalen fell into step beside her. Well, Chief Kalen of the Iron Fang, if you're going to reshape the world, you'll need someone practical around to keep you from getting killed in the process. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. A strong maybe. Ask me again after I've seen what you're really building here, after I know if your pretty words match your actions. Fair enough. Kalen felt lighter than he had in months, despite the challenges ahead. Though I should warn you, I'm very persistent. I've noticed. It's annoying, but effective. Elira laughed, the sound carrying across the settlement and turning heads. Ask me again later, much later. As they walked deeper into the Iron Fang settlement, the sun rose higher, burning away the morning mist. Around them, life continued. Warriors training, children playing, families preparing for the day ahead. And in the distance, barely visible on the horizon, storm clouds gathered, suggesting the conflicts yet to come. But for now, in this moment, there was hope. There was possibility. And there was a chief and a healer walking side by side toward a future neither could have imagined when fire and fate first brought them together. The world was changing, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would change it together.